Hello everyone, this is Tyrese Heck again, and now we're doing my first end of the year list for 2020. I've never done this before, and we're watching some dogs. If you hear that, that's there. We're watching some dogs, and but anyway, so I kind of feel like I wanted to do this yesterday, and the reason why was because we lost a legend. It just got announced that we lost a legend. MF Doom fortunately passed away in October, but his death was just announced today. And he's a really, really great musician. He was one of my favorites. It's really upsetting to hear the news. His legacy should live on. And he was a very, very, very great musician. One of my favorites. Now, I hope this happens to help you guys cheer up if you happen to be missing him like I am. And this is my end of the year list. Okay, so my honorable mentions. First of all, my honorable mentions. So my first honorable mention is How I'm Feeling Now by Charlie XCX. And she made a really great album this year, How I'm Feeling Now. And it's kind of a return to her bubblegum. Well, she's already done kind of bubblegum bass, all that stuff, but it's kind of has some glitch elements in it too. There's some, I think the song Forever might be my favorite song she did. The song Claws is really good too. I think I still prefer the Mixtape Pop 2 over that, but it's definitely one of the strongest that she's done. And then next is Alias by Shy Girl. This is an EP by her. And I know that some people might try to jog on her because a lot of her lyrics are really sexual and all that stuff, but she has some really, really great production, and she's less industrial. There's still some industrial in it, but it's kind of based more against like progressive, deconstructive rhythms and all that stuff. It's a really great EP. One of my favorite EPs of the year too. And my third honorable mention is Circles by Mac Miller. He passed away in 2018. And he released an album called Swimming the same year he passed away, and this album was meant to follow it. And I think it's even better, actually. It's more of a soul album, if that makes sense, than a hip hop album. But I think I'd say this is my favorite out of his studio albums, is Circles, but I still think my favorite release that he did easily is still probably Faces. But the song Good News might be my favorite song he's ever done. But he did a really good job on that. It's really sad that still know he passed away so young. And my next honorable mention is What's Your Pleasure by Jessie Ware. And I've actually never listened to her music before until I listened to this. But it's a really great album though. And I probably still want to go check out some of her other stuff. But it's kind of like a disco themed dance pop. There's a bit of house in there too. A lot of the lyrics are really catchy. I think it's going to be the end of the year. It's for a lot of people's album of the year, but personally, for me, it's just an honorable mention, but it's still really great. Then my fifth honorable mention is 2017 to 2019 by Against All Logic, and he's more well known under his real name, Nicholas Jar. He's was born in New York, but he grew up in Chile. Now, this is kind of like a sequel album to this one called 2012 to 2017, and it's 2012 to 2017 was kind of a deep house, kind of outsider house, really kind of, and this one is more of a industrial themed and tech house and a lot more experimental. I think I prefer the other one more, the 2012 to 2017. Usually I'd be more into industrial stuff, but it's still really great. But I think I prefer the 2012 to 2017. But that release is really great too. A lot more experimental. I can see a lot of people preferring it over it. Personally, I think the other one's better. But it's still really great though. This one is. He did a lot of stuff this year too. So, anyways, now onto my number 10. Onto my number 10, I mean. Okay, my number 10 is Matmos, The Consuming Flame, Opens Exercises in Group Form. And this is one of the most underrated releases, in my opinion, of the year. And Matmos is a very underrated group as well. So, they're a duo, and they're also a couple. But now Matmos has been around since the the late 80s, early 90s. But they're kind of like an electronic group, but they've kind of done all different sorts of styles of electronic. They kind of started out as a folktronica group, and then they started doing this really unique thing of sampling stuff. So they sampled an album made entirely out of their washing machine. Then they did an album last year made entirely out of the sounds of plastic. With this one, there's not as much sampling, but there's definitely a lot of it though. Now, this album is 3 hours long, and normally that would probably sound torturous to a lot of people, and I can see them probably sounding torturous to a lot of you. So, but I personally think it's pretty thoroughly entertaining all the way through. I think it's, even though it's 3 hours long, there's, for the most part, it's really consistent. There's a few tracks I don't like off of it, but there's so many. It's kind of, they kind of get bogged down with everything else. And I think the third disc is my favorite out of it. The first disc is my least favorite out of them. And I feel like if it was just the third disc, this would probably be in my top 3. The first disc is pretty great too, but it's not nearly as good as the second and third disc. But now, with this, we kind of get into it's kind of, they did all different kind of sorts of electronic music, and there's some experimental rock in here too, and there's some really humorous samples. They sampled the Netflix sound at one point. And the song Blessed Order is my favorite off of this. That song's really pretty. It's like this ambient techno turns into a glitch noise drone. It's a really, really cool track. And there's some humorous stuff on there like that. There's so many songs off of this, it's hard to remember the name. But there's so many artists featured on this too. But there's this one track where they sample the sound of like Netflix's like that little boom sound or whatever that Netflix does. And I like the little spoken word bits. They're pretty funny. And anyways, yeah, it's a great album. That's my number 10 though. Number 9. Right. I had to censor this one, but my number 9 is Origin of the Alimonies by Liturgy. Liturgy is a New York transcendental black metal, as she calls it, or they're mostly, I'd probably categorize them as avant-garde metal and black metal. But with this, we kind of go into some chamber music, some opera, and we also get that glitch and classical kind of like inspiration that her last album did too. I personally prefer HAQQ over this, but this is definitely one of her strongest releases. It's probably my second favorite that she did. There's this one I'd say is a bit more experimental though, and a lot more out there, diverse. There's one song where it has a little trap beat, just out of nowhere. There's some really, really beautiful little synth passages in a lot of this. And there's that one, Apparition of the Eternal Church is my favorite song off of this. I'd probably say it's 20-minute long, like really, really great track that song is. And, bad, that's a little firework that went off. She kind of goes and it kind of, what's the word? She kind of like, I also like the fact that she kind of like showed her, like her transgender and like her pride for her transgender stuff. I thought was really cool too. Kind of a bit of that falls in the album too. Now, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. I heard the I was barking, but anyways, let's go on to my number 8. Alright, so this one is Brass by Moor Mother and Billy Woods, and she released a lot of albums this year, and Billy Woods has been kind of busy too, but this album, I heard, this one came out December 18th, so pretty recently, this month, but it's ended up being one of my favorites anyway. Now, this is a very kind of abstract and experimental release, I'd probably say, even for hip-hop standards, I'd say. I mean, experimental hip-hop standards. There's also some very cryptic, violent poetry in this too. There's a bit of some horror industrial elements in it as well. And the lyrics on this are really great too. And some really, really great instrumentals. There's a mixture of soul in this as well. And Moor Mother's poetry works really, really well with Billy Woods' like a flow. I think it's a really, really great album. And I actually think it might be the best Billy Woods has done yet, and definitely the best Moor Mother has done yet too. And my number 7 is, Aden Okays by Ichiko Aoba. Now, she is a Japanese musician from, she's from Kyoto. Now, she's a folk singer, and this is her. I think she released an album. Her last album was in 2017, but she released a single that wasn't on this year as well. But I think I still prefer her album Zero over this, but this is definitely one of the strongest she's done, though. Her music is just very, very pretty and calming. It's very atmospheric, also just very sparse and also very minimalistic. I can't really understand what she's saying because she sings in Japanese, but her music is very pretty and calming. With this, we kind of have an oceanic, not oceanic, but like an aquatic, with some beautiful atmospheric ambience there with some waves and some really, really great singing. She sings beautifully on this as well. She has a very great voice, and her guitar strums mixed in with the ambience is a really, really good outcome, I think. But anyways, this is now on to my number 6. All right, my number 6 is Set My Heart on Fire Immediately by Perfume Genius. He was born in Iowa, but I think he grew up in Washington. Now, I'm a pretty big fan of him, and I actually think this is my favorite release he's done yet. I think he's kind of gotten better after each release. Really, really consistent. With this we have a lot of genre diversity in this. I think it's really cool. I think, actually, I think one of my favorite songs of the year is On the Floor. And there's songs like that where it has a bit of a disco and dance kind of sound to it with some psychedelic elements. And then we get a lot more heavier atmospheric moments with some tracks like Describe, which has a bit of some alt country and some shoegaze with some noise pop influences in it. And we have let me see. Not bad. There's some other really great songs off of this, like Jason. There's a bit of a kind of ambient pop kind of sound to it. There's a lot of ambient pop influence on this as well. A lot more than it usually is. There's a lot of atmosphere in this, if that makes sense. That one, there's also some electronic influences on this as well, which is really, really interesting. Now, anyways, now on to my number 5. So my number 5 is Microphones in 2020 by the Microphones. It's their first album in years, and I own the record of it. And I think I would say I still prefer The Glow Part 2 and Mount Eerie over this, but I would say this is definitely one of the strongest releases Phil has ever done. And it's also just one long song, a 40-minute song talking about his whole career, kind of all from growing, doing all his work with the Microphones. It kind of tells a big story about his work. It's really interesting to hear his thoughts on it, and some great lyrics and instrumentation. Then some people might not like it because it's a big long drone of that's some fireworks going off. This is a big long drones and and some people might not like it because of that, because it is repetitive. I also have to say that, but there's still a lot of progression to it, if that makes sense. And the effects and all that stuff. There's some distortion. It does a really, really good job of keeping a mood, having things escalate, I guess, if that makes sense. It's a really, really great release. One of my favorites of the year. On to my number 4. So this one is Post-Human Survival Horror. It's an EP by Bring Me the Horizon. And I never would have thought that I'd prefer, that the Microphones released an album that I loved, and a group like Bring Me the Horizon, which I like, but I'm not super big on, released one of my favorite metal EPs I've ever heard. And they did a really great job on this. It's their best yet, easily, in my opinion, without question. and they're going to do a whole series of EPs like this. It'll eventually be an album, so I'm excited to hear that. Now, if you didn't know, Bring Me the Horizon, they're quite a popular metal band, but they kind of did some more popular elements recently, but they went back to metal roots, kind of an alternative metal sound, even some new metal influences in here and some electronic, industrial influences on this as well. But here's the thing, I think it kind of does have some new metal elements. I'd hear a bit of some Linkin Park in here, a bit of some Korn, but usually I wouldn't really like that, but this album's very fun. It's very, very fun to listen to, and there's a lot of like really, really great instrumentals on this. That one song, King Slayer of Baby Metal, is a really, really great song. One of my favorite metal songs I've heard in a long time, actually. And features on this are really cool too. I think a lot of my favorite songs ended up being the ones with features. But anyways, on to my number 3. So some of you might not understand why I'm including this. Maybe for one, it's because of the fact that it's not, whenever it's on streaming, it's always on this, the America single. But the reason why I included this is because, so I kind of have a rule. So if it's a non-album single that is at least 10 minutes long, I will include it. And the reason why is because there's some things that are labeled as an EP, like Uneven Compromise by Little Ugly Mane, for instance, is labeled as an EP and it's just a 10-minute song. Or Soulless by Earl Sweatshirt, it's just a 10-minute song. Well, this is technically a single, and it's a B-side. It has its own cover art, and it has its own kind of thing on page on YouTube. So I just decided to include it. Now, my Rajneesh is, I actually got this record just because I love singles so much, the B-side. It was not included on his new album, and if it was, it would easily be the best song off of it. Now, am I to say this is one of the best songs he's ever done? Maybe not, but I'd say it's, maybe I would say it's one of the best songs he's ever done, actually. But there's probably a lot of songs I like off of Carrying the Well more, a lot of songs I like off of Illinois more, but this song has some really, really beautiful elements in it. There's some really great progression in this. It kind of reminds me a bit of Alvin Rowe a bit. There's that Vesuvius, I think is the name of the song. There's a little callback to that. It's really, really cool. And that little freak out with the "Oh, nation, I see my need, That's a really, really pretty song. It's only a single, but I thought I'd include it. But it's a really great song. Now, anyways, on to my number 2. This one is Mestarin Kynsi by Oranssi Pazuzu, and this was my number 1 of the year for a really long time. They're a Finnish, it's kind of hard to really label them. They're kind of like a psychedelic rock group, but they're also an avant-garde metal and black metal group. They're from Tampere, Finland. And this is the album I have for that. Now, I gotta admit, they're not a group I listen to a whole lot. I like them, and I listen to their music, but they really, really got me hooked with this record, which I think is easily the best they've done yet. And it's actually one of my favorite metal albums I've ever listened to in my life, actually. It's actually probably my favorite black metal album, actually, too. Now, with this, there's only 6 songs, but it reaches a length close to an hour. And there's not really a song I disliked off of this either. And there's a lot of electronic elements in this too. Some really kind of creepy, sinister little synthesizers played along with this. And I love that song, the Kulen Eina Men Alta. It's one of my favorite off of this. It has a little club, kind of little banger kind of thing kind of goes off at the end that I thought was really interesting. I've never heard that in metal before. The sound for this album is just incredibly unique too. It has really, really interesting psychedelic tinges in there. It has some really kind of futuristic, spacey atmosphere to it as well. The ambience off of this gives a really, really good mood. It's just a really, really, really great album, and one of the most unique metal albums I've ever listened to in my life. And also one of my favorites too. Now on to my number one, which you guys probably already saw this coming if you saw that video I made recently, but Visions of Bodies Being Burned by Clipping is easily my favorite album of 2020. I've been a big fan of Clipping for a long time, and I'm really glad they're finally getting some really big critical recognition that they deserve. David Diggs is an amazing lyricist. He's a great MC. Very talented actor as well. He can kind of do it all, and I really think that's really cool. Now, one thing I gotta say is I really, really love it when David, the group, goes into darker territory with their lyrics. And they did a really, really good job on this. Now, they made another album, There Existed an Addiction to Blood, last year, which is also a horrorcore themed album. And I thought that one was great too. It was easily their best they did yet, I thought. And I was actually kind of hesitant to order this at first because I was like, they made it such a good album last year. There's no way they can make one even better. But I was wrong. This album is easily, without a doubt, the best thing they ever did. And it's probably one of my favorite hip hop albums I've ever heard in my life. It's I'd actually even say it's my second favorite hip hop album of all time after The Powers That Be by Death Grips. This one's my second favorite. And so this, and they I can see this not being for everyone though, because the really kind of noisy elements in this, some people might say, well, David's vocals aren't really intense enough for this, but I think, I feel like I can't really see any other artist really, like other than David, taking a role in this. So he does bring out a lot of intensity in this too. The features on this are really great too. I don't think there's one dull moment on this actually. I don't think. It's a really, really great album. One of the best hip hop records I've ever heard in my life too. And easily my favorite of the year. And that's about it, guys. So that's about it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys are doing well. And I hope to see you soon. All right, thanks, bye.